Something startles this man. And he turned and he discovers a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he says. And she said, I am your servant Ruth. And then she said, "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." That took a lot of courage, a lot of boldness. The first thing, and we'll talk about what's going on here in a second. The first thing we notice is her obedience. She told Naomi, "I'll do whatever you say." That's what faith is, folks. Believing God enough to do what He tells us to do in His Word, even when you can't see how it turns out. Even when you can't see what's at the end. If you can map it out step by step by step and have certainty to know how it's all going to come out, that's not faith, folks. Faith is following God when you can't see the end of the road. Steve said something the other day, I'd never heard it that way stated before. But your faith is when you drive as far as your headlights will let you see. But you keep going. I think that was you, Steve. I'd never heard it put that way before. I like that. You may not be able to see the big picture, because there's a good chance you aren't the big picture. But you're part of what God has in store. So faithfully you believe and you go on. Folks, you really can't say that you believe God's Word. You can just keep saying that till you're blue in the face. But the only part of this Bible that you believe is the part that you act on. Don't tell me you believe the rest of it. You only believe, we only believe the part that we act on. The part that we live. The threshing floor was usually a rock floor enclosed by an arrangement, usually circular, of stones. It would usually be located on the top of a hill to catch a breeze. The grain stalks would all be piled up there, and men and animals would tread on the stalks to separate the kernels from the stalk. Then they would use a winnowing fork, a wooden fork, to toss the kernels up into the air. The breeze would blow away the lighter husks or the chaff, and the heavier grain would fall back down to the earth. This threshed grain, that was the wealth of the farmer. That was the asset. That was what you were after. So during this time, this most important time, the owner would sleep at the threshing floor to make sure the job that was done right and to guard the crop that was separated out. Can you picture Ruth now as she slips into that threshing floor? She watches where Boaz lies down, and she waits. When she's sure that he's asleep, she creeps up, and she takes his cloak, which is covering his legs. And she folds that cloak up until his feet are exposed. Then she lies down at his feet, and she waits. And when Boaz wakes up, she proposes marriage. Now, if it didn't sound like a marriage proposal to you, he said, "Who art thou?" This is verse 8. And she answered, "I am Ruth, thy handmaid. Spread before thy skirt over thy handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman." Now, in our culture, that doesn't sound like a marriage proposal, does it? Spread the corner of your garment over me, because we're kinfolks. That doesn't sound like a marriage proposal, but it was. The reason it doesn't sound like it to us is because we don't have the Jewish background for it. The phrase, "spread the cover of your garment over me," was a reference to the Jewish wedding ceremony. Even to this day, at Jewish weddings, the groom will cover his bride with a silk or with a linen cloth. More modern Jewish weddings have the cloth over the couple as a canopy, but the symbolism is the same, being covered together. So here's the lesson for us. Our lesson: we should take bold steps in trusting God. This was bold, excuse me, for Ruth to do this. So when God tells you to do something in His Word, do you say, God says do this, I'll do it. I'll do it. Sometimes we overanalyze God's Word. We suffer that paralysis of analysis. Boy, if I just really understood all this, I'd do all of it. Well, go ahead and act on the part that you do understand. Wait for the understanding on the rest later. Don't wait to understand it all. There's an old Chinese fable about overanalyzing. Translates into English this way. Once upon a time, there was a mother duck who was trying to teach her ducklings to walk. And one of her ducklings just couldn't figure it out. And she said, but Mama, do I start with my left foot or with my right foot? And the mother duck said, hush, just walk. Folks, that's what God says to us sometimes. Hush, just walk. Read what you read and walk it. Live it. Respond to it. You haven't figured out Ezekiel and Revelation and Daniel yet? That's okay. Live Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John until you get the rest of it figured out. When it comes to trusting and obeying God, it's like the Nike slogan that originated in the 80s and they continue to use today. Just do it.